to everyone. And actually, I don't want my presentation to be very formal. I think that it's better to reserve more time for questions and answers, because in that case I would understand what you are interested in. And I didn't prepare a very formal presentation. I don't have a text in front of me, just few notes. But I think that I would have to present some background about the history of Ukraine, about the history of our church. I represent not only the Ukrainian Catholic University, but also the Ukrainian Catholic Church, which is the largest Eastern Catholic Church in communion with Rome, which is following Byzantine tradition, by the way. And also I will tell you a bit about my university and its mission. Actually, I came here to Steubenville. This my coming was planned long time before the revolution started. Professor Alexander Sich mentioned that I became the head of the pastoral department at our university. And already from the beginning of my work, I've been thinking that I'd like to visit your university, because we know about you, and we know that you have a very good pastoral program here. There are households right here, and we'd like to build something like that in Ukraine. We'd like to use some of your experience. So today in the morning I met Father Brad, and he told me about different methods, spiritual methods that you use here, and about the model. So we'd like to use it and to share with you and different spiritual perspectives that we have back there in Ukraine. But I think that apart from my learning of your pastoral methods, it would be very useful if I share some personal experience of participating in the revolution of dignity. We call it revolution of dignity that is taking place right now in Ukraine. And I will tell you about some conclusions, but also I'd like to share with you my spiritual vision of this revolution. My aim is not only to inform you about different events. You can read them on the news, but our people and our university students are going through very important spiritual transformation that is taking place right now in Ukraine. And from that perspective, I would say that what is taking place in Ukraine right now is not only a problem which needs to be solved somehow. I hear from people here in the United States, many people approach me and say to me, terrible things are happening in Ukraine. We'd like them to stop. We'd like this to be over, right? But I also think that what is happening in Ukraine transforms our people and is giving birth to a better society. Actually, what we are having there is a birth of a civil society, which we didn't have before. And the president of our university, who is American-born, Ukrainian, from Syracuse, and he graduated from Harvard University. In one of his talks to the students, he told them, you are making the history, and the history makes you. And after revolution, you will inevitably become different than you were before. Those are important words. He also said very important the reflection in front of our university's community. He said that right now Ukraine is going on a pilgrimage from the empire of fear to the kingdom of dignity. You are all familiar with Old Testament, and you know, as people of Israel left Egypt and then to a promised land, but they spent 40 years in the desert, right? So this revolution seems to me like leaving Egypt. Seems to me very similar to Israel leaving Egypt and walking on the pilgrimage, preparing to enter the promised land. And then people were standing on the main square of Kyiv and demanding from the president their natural rights, human rights. It is similar as Moses was asking the Pharaoh, saying, "Let my people go." And his heart was like a stone, right? He didn't want to listen. That's why he was punished. And we can see punishment for a contemporary president and politics who are supporting him right now in this moment. But people went to a pilgrimage, and they are growing in their understanding what is happening with them. So from that perspective, I would say that what is happening in Ukraine is very important thing, and the promised land is not achieved yet. There are plenty of things which needs to be done. Yet it's already certain that there is no way back, and we can see that democracy in Ukraine seems to be winning right now. But there are still questions from the spiritual perspective. There are still people in Ukraine who do not really understand what happened, and there is there are many questions like, why did we have to suffer? Why did we have such a president among us? And why so many people die? Or even, where was God? Then those terrible things happened. But in that case, I'm also saying to my students that there is no resurrection without cross. There is no happy celebration of Easter if you do not go through the sacrifice of the great land which we are approaching right now. Great land, right? And also, if you want to achieve something really important in our political, social life, spiritual life in Ukraine, we also had to go through sufferings. God does not punish us. God always teaches us, and He gives us a lesson. And He has given those lessons before. He has given great gifts to Ukraine in the past years. In 1991, then the Soviet Union collapsed. We received our independence, but not necessarily freedom, but we received independence in 1991. No people were killed. It was a great gift. But people thought that they do not have to work too much on the development of their countries. There would be no more Soviet or communist or Russian influence, and this is enough. Everything will go by itself. But we were wrong, and we understood in 10 years that we have to be active. And we had another gift. In 2004, we already had the so-called Orange Revolution, similar to revolutions taking place in Georgia or in Egypt. But in 2004, we had a good candidate for president. It was Viktor Yushchenko. Probably you heard about him, because right after his election, he went to the United States. He went to a Senate, and he was very warmly welcomed here in the United States. But again, our people thought, if we have a good president, he will do what we need for ourselves. We do not need to control him, because he is a good guy. And still, it was not enough. We didn't learn from the history too much. And I hope that this revolution will show our people that everyone has to be responsible for his or her own country. People went to the main square, and even now, then Viktor Yanukovych, our former president, is gone. People are still standing on the main square because they want to control even new democratic government. They don't want them to just trade places in the government. They want them to understand that from now on, people are taking responsibility for their country. And they would look very closely. If you are getting very rich because of your political career, we will control you. That's what we are saying, you know. So this is actually the birth of the social society that we are having in Ukraine. And I think that that sacrifice of almost 100 people, and maybe even more, we don't know yet. There are still many people missing. And over 1,000 people are injured, and among them are students as well. Some people were unjustly judged. One of our professors, former rector of our university, he was charged, and we had to support him in the court, Father Michael Demit. So in the last 3 months, it was very stressful, quite a difficult time, but also there is a hope. There is a lot of hope in the last events in Ukraine, and as you know, it's not over, because right now the main issue is the unity of our country, of Ukraine. Ukraine is a big country. We have 46 million people living there. And our country has always been between East and West. And I have to tell you a little bit more about the history, probably, of Ukraine. Kyiv has always been the historical center of Ukraine. It is 1,500 years old. That's an old city. And also this city was a cradle of Christianity in Eastern Europe. Actually, Moscow was a daughter church to the Church of Kyiv. And Moscow was established several centuries after Kyiv was already there on the political map. But right now they are trying to present themselves as mother church and mother land for Ukrainians. And Christianity was accepted in Ukraine in 988. So this is over 1,000 years ago. It was accepted from Constantinople, so in its Byzantine Eastern form. But what is interesting, that even after the year 1054, when formally Orthodox and Catholic Church excommunicated, there was a schism. In Ukraine, at least for another 200 years, we were still in communion with both, with Rome and Constantinople. And this is very important about understanding of Ukraine, because it shows that we are really between the East and West, and we are integral part of the West and of the East, politically, nationally, and in respect of religion. And but from the 12th and 13th century, the church in Ukraine, the so-called Kievan Metropolia, actually became Orthodox. But with the fall of Constantinople in 1453, there was a decline of Orthodoxy, you know. And in Ukraine, our bishops understood that this is no longer possible to stay with Constantinople, because there was no theological education, we had so many different problems. And our church, Ukrainian church, was the first among other Eastern churches which decided to join Rome. And we signed in the end of the 16th century, in 1596, we signed the so-called the Union of Brest. And after this event, many other Eastern churches decided also to join Rome. So that's the beginning of our church, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, which exists, we believe, from the time of the baptism by Saint Vladimir in Kiev. But we can also say that it exists for 400 years from the Union of Brest, as we joined communion with Rome. And it was a happy event, but some of the bishops and faithful still decided to stay Orthodox. And the Union of Brest, which was supposed to become the kind of reform for the church, also caused division in Ukraine, and which exists to the present day. Because in Ukraine we have Catholic Church, Eastern Catholic Church, which exists mostly in the western part. And there are from 5 to 7 million people belonging to the Catholic Church. And the Eastern Ukraine, which was mostly under influence of Russia and belonged to the Russian Empire for 300 years, it is predominantly Orthodox. So there are differences: Catholic, Orthodox, influence of Russia, and influence of the West. And this is the main problem right now, because people in the eastern Ukraine, and especially Crimea Peninsula, which is in the Black Sea, they think of themselves as part of the Russian world. But not many of them, but some of them. And right now there is a threat that Russians may, okay, this is probably too soon to say something, but there are some threats from Russia. Anyway, what is important about our church, Ukrainian Catholic Church, that at the time of the Soviet Union, it was persecuted. In 1946, in my city, in Lviv, we had organized by the Soviet state and KGB council of our church, and some priests were just forced to participate in that council, and there was a decision to join the Orthodox Church, the Moscow Patriarchate. But most of the priests and all of the bishops decided they would go underground, and so many of them were persecuted. We have, apart from being the head of the pastoral department, I also a parish priest, and I serve at the church which was blessed by John Paul II, and he came to Ukraine, and it's named after modern martyrs of the Ukrainian church. He proclaimed 27 martyrs when he came to Ukraine. Some priests were just killed, and some suffered very severe persecutions. One of them was crucified. Another one was boiled in the water, hot water. Our head of the church, Patriarch Joseph Slipey, was imprisoned, and he spent 18 years in the different camps in Siberia, and was released only because of cooperation of President Kennedy and Pope John 23rd. And he went back to Rome in 1963, participated in the Second Vatican Council, and he had made his famous speech in front of all the bishops of the Catholic Church. And he said that Ukraine suffered so much, our church suffered so much, that I believe that we deserve a patriarchate. Because right now we have a major archbishop, but our church wants to be the church of its own legal standing, and the church sui juris, which is quite an autonomous church in communion with Rome. And that's how we understand our identity and mission right now. We can talk about this more, but this is not the main topic of today's presentation. So also one of the most important ideas of our Patriarch Joseph Slipey, who suffered, was to re-establish the university, which would be the place for people from different countries, from Ukrainians who can come together and study theology and rebuild the church. So he initiated and he established the Ukrainian Catholic University in Rome as a small institution exactly 50 years ago. This year we celebrate 50th university of the Ukrainian Catholic University, and very soon after proclamation of independence, our university was re-established in Ukraine in 1994, and so already for 20 years we have very dynamic development of this institution, which is very modern, which is very much oriented on the Western values and Eastern spiritual tradition. And this university takes very active participation in the social and even political life of our country, to the extent that in the past our university was also threatened by the government. And we had several times that representatives of the secret police or KGB were coming to our university, to our rector, saying this, please give us names of your students participating in the activities against the government. We had that. But right away we would go to mass media and public places, and we will say that something like that happened, and we are against this. And it happened many years before this revolution started. So even and you know that this revolution of dignity started from it started in November, 21st of November. President Yanukovych decided that he wouldn't sign the economical agreement with European Union. And students, young students, were the first who came on the streets to protest, because they were born already in the independent Ukraine, and they do not see their country as being part of the so-called Russian world. they see their country as part of Europe, and not so much associate themselves with moral values of Europe, but mostly with living according to law, having just trials in the court, things like that. Western values in that respect. So the students of our university, of our Catholic university, came on the streets one day before the students came to the main square in Kyiv. So it all started actually from our university and from our students. And it was totally peaceful demonstration. But I think that the government and Yanukovych made a great mistake, because they thought that they can act like the government acts in Russia and Belarus. And on the night from the on the night to the 1st of December, they sent police to expel people from the main square, students, and there was no need to use power against them. But they do not only like push them out of the square, but they beat them so severely that many people got to hospitals. And thanks God that today we have media. Everything was filmed, everything went immediately to the internet, Facebook, and next day 1 million people came to the main square of Ukraine from different parts of Ukraine. 1 million. And already not only students, but everyone. And people were standing in peaceful protest against this government. And very soon it became not an issue of European Union. People just forgot about Europe. They don't want to become part of Europe. They want to build Europe in Ukraine. That's the main issue. This is not political. This is not political revolution. This is revolution of dignity. People are fighting for the truth, for the human rights, for just a normal life in their homeland. They don't want to be enemies to anyone, even to Russia. We want to be friends with Russia. We want to be good neighbors. We want to trade, to have political good relations. But we want to have our independent state. And we want to have peace and just normal human rights. In Ukraine, people are usually very obedient to the law. They pay taxes most of the time, but they realize that all of the taxes go to the president and to his family. So he was able to build houses, maybe you saw on the news, 85 million house, another house 100 million. So just one man, and he had billions. In 4 years, he became so rich that he had several billions. And people who were with him also, they were billionaires. Can we say that? Billionaires. So the people could not be in this position anymore. And they standed on the main square for 2 months, but they realized that nobody hears them. That's why some of them had to act even aggressively, but they didn't have weapons. And the state obviously had weapons, and they had army, they had police, and they started to shoot people. And we witnessed that last week many people were just killed by snipers. But what was not taken into account by the Ukrainian government, that even then they start shooting people. People would not leave the main square. On the contrary, even more people were coming. And what was even more important, that it was not only the Maidan, the main square, where the revolution was taking place, but people went to the streets in thousands and tens of thousands in most of the cities of Ukraine, taking power from the officials which were connected with Yanukovych. They didn't understand that this is not only a small number of people from Western Ukraine who are not satisfied with his ruling, but this is the whole nation, basically almost the whole nation that was participating in this revolution of dignity. So we understood several important things from this experience of revolution. We understood that it was a process of maturation of our nation, and right now we do not expect so much changes from the politics, but we understand now that we have to expect changes from ourselves. And we understood that the revolution actually took place not on the main square, but it has to take place in our souls. The Maidan is in our souls, where we stand for human rights. This is important. We understood that we don't want to have change of political personalities, but we want to have change of the system. Because there is a difficulty right now, because even in the opposition there are politics who have different political orientation, but they can act as the old ones. So this is important, that not only that other people will become our prime minister, president, but it's important that they follow different system, that we expel corruption that existed in Ukraine. People understood that freedom as the most principal right of every human being is more important than even life itself. That's why so many people went and suffered and even were killed. They understood that the freedom is more important than life. And from the spiritual perspective, I would also say that right now we can really say that God is among us and He is giving us a new chance. He again gives us a great gift which we have to use responsibly, and He also showed us that even if we think that evil is so strong and it has all power and weapons and army, sometimes it seemed to us that we will never be able to move Yanukovych and his supporters and this army. The evil was so strong. But it was important to believe that evil can never win. That from the beginning of creation, God has already expelled evil. And on the cross, God has already won. It's important to accept this reality as Christians. But we are already winners, and to live this reality. It was important for Christians in Ukraine to understand this and to live this reality. Our church took very active participation in the revolution, But even though there was a threat against our church, the Ministry of Culture wrote a letter to the head of our church saying that you can no longer have liturgical services on the main square among the protesters, or we will close your church. We will deny the registration. But the head of our church immediately went to the press conference and told about this to everyone. And we had to back up. But still, there was a threat, and as it has always been from the time of persecution. But our head of the church also told that the church cannot be involved in political issues. But our priests can and should be always among their people. So we had many priests among the protesters. We had everyday masses, everyday liturgies during all this time. And it was very important to see for people the church is with them, which cannot be said about the Russian Orthodox Church, which was a side of this process. And in all our eparchies, in all our dioceses, bishops called people that they have to pray basically all the time for the people on the main square. And in our Catholic university, we had constant prayer, people changing themselves even at day and night praying. And we also had very strong fast, very strict fast. Our bishop said that evil can be expelled only by prayer and fast. So in each diocese we had very strong fast, 1 day a week. In Lviv diocese it was Thursday. In Kiev it was Wednesday. And so people fasted, and the strong fast meant just water, no food at all, or at least bread. So many people fasted. Also our bishop said that in 9 p.m. all have to gather for prayer in their homes. Father, mother have to kneel in front of their children, and they all have to pray for the freedom in Ukraine. This is very powerful moment. And people were praying all the time, and I think it was very decisive for what eventually happened. And democracy seems to be winning right now, and we can see that God is alive. He actually was there all the time, and those sacrifices were needed and accepted, so we can cherish our freedom and understand that we are responsible for our country, and so we can guarantee that nothing like this would happen in the future.